Hey everybody, welcome once again to the Wrestling Inc. podcast. I'm Glenn Rubenstein, joined as always by Raj Giri and Chris Callicutt, and today, JJ Dillon, our guest, one of the great wrestling managers. You know him as the strategic leader of the original Four Horsemen, and now he's got a podcast, the JJ Dillon Show, which has episode 4 coming out this week. JJ, welcome to the Wrestling Inc. podcast.
Thank you very much. I know I'll be talking to, let's see, Raj, Chris, and Glenn. You're Glenn, so
yeah.
I'm really looking forward to this. I love talking wrestling, and this is it's going to be good.
Well, let's get right to it. How is it kind of being back on camera in a sense, and back back in the wrestling world with your podcast every Thursday?
Well, our podcast is audio only, so this is another dimension which I'm comfortable doing too. I was on camera as far back as I can ever remember, and I'm never intimidated by a microphone or a camera, so I'm very comfortable doing this, and hopefully your listeners or viewers will be happy and enjoy this episode.
Absolutely. Speaking of being on camera, Matt Morgan, who does our Monday night podcast with us, our post-Raw podcast. And he had a question. He wanted to know, you were, very a legendary manager in WCW, the NWA, legendary manager of the Four Horsemen. What made you move to the WWF? I believe that was 1989, correct?
Yes.
And whose decision was it for it to be not to be an on-camera role? Because that was around the same time that Tully and Arn jump ship too, so it seemed like that would have been a natural fit.
Well, just to give you a real quick history, my career goes back 60 years, and I have a picture that I pulled down off the wall because we can't swing around and show it, but here it is, and this is, try to get it so we don't have glare, but this was 60 years ago, around 1957. It's in the basement of the Armory in Trenton, New Jersey, and you see me as a 15, 16-year-older with Johnny Valentine, who was my idol and who I started a fan club for. And the other picture is the original Zebra Kid, George Bolus, and both of these pictures are personalized to me and hold a position on my wall that I'm very proud of. And if you could see it up close, you'll note that they were signed in ballpoint pen, because back in the 50s they didn't have Sharpies. But I started as a fan club with Johnny Valentine, hung around the business, ended up, they used to do a weekly studio show in Philadelphia that Ray Fabiani was the promoter, and had a big show once a month, and they would use that show to promote it, and it was at the NBC studios in downtown Philly. I was in college at the time, and I used to come down with the guy that set the ring up. And one week they had a blizzard, and enough of the wrestlers were there to do the show, but the referees were assigned by the athletic commission, and no referee showed up. And they had to tape the show, and they're looking around, well, who could referee? And all eyes came to me from being around a lot, and they said, could you do it? And I said, I think so. And so I refereed for the whole hour, and I guess I did a good enough job that they said, we want to make the moves to get you on the athletic commission roster. Willie Gilzenberg, and I go back to Vince Sr. Used to come down every month for the big shows at the Philly Arena, and got to know Vince Sr. on a first name basis, and he knew me and was very kind to me. Arnold Skolin, even when I wasn't assigned, there were some shows where I didn't get assigned because it was a commission thing, but I would go anyway because I loved the business. And Arnold Skolin or Angelo Savoldi used to do advances for the wrestlers, and Vince would be there. And next thing I know, the first time Arnold or Angelo would come up and just shake hands, good to see you, and they'd palm me like a $20 bill. And they said, Vince was happy that you care enough to come down here and be here. So I have great memories of Vince Sr. And then after I started wrestling, I was a referee for 8 years. My dream was to be a wrestler, and I thought, well, maybe this is as far as my dream's going to carry me. The Sheik came in, the original Sheik, Eddie Farhat from Detroit, for a series of matches with Bruno Sammartino. And I never was really formally trained as a wrestler. All of my experience in terms of timing and philosophy of the business, I learned as the third man in the ring for a lot of Bruno Sammartino's huge championship matches in the Philadelphia, Baltimore, Boston, and against Gorilla Monsoon, Baron Sakuna, Toru Tanaka, George the Animal Steel, and just to be in the ring. And it's friendship started with Bruno in 1962 when he came here, and we've been friends for 55 years. Our friendship goes back that far. But after about 8 years, when the Sheik came in, just talking to him in the dressing room, I said, well, you know, my dream really was I wanted to be a wrestler. And he said, well, I promote in Detroit and Ohio. You come out and see me and bring your tights, we'll put you in the ring, see what you could do. And I took him up on it. Went to Detroit. Actually, my first time in the ring was in Dayton, Ohio. And I was in a tag match against the Hells Angels. And I can't remember who my partner was. And the next day they said, well, the guys were going to Pittsburgh to do TV. You want to go? And I said, yeah. I wasn't supposed to do anything else till the Sunday for TV for the Sheik. So I went to Channel 11 studio in Pittsburgh with Chili Billy Cardille, and my first single professional match was with Killer Kowalski. And not a lot of guys can say that's who they wrestled. And as I reflect back, probably was as closest that I think I ever came to dying in the ring, because Kowalski he was on you, and just about the time you got ready to take a deep breath, you'd feel a boot in your belly. So, and then the next day I went to up to, I think, Walled Lake, Michigan or somewhere, and did the Sheik's TV. And Arnold Skolin, the only time we were ever tag team partners was that Sunday, and we faced the Hells Angels again. And that opened the door, and went back next year for that following year for a whole week. That was been 68. The following year I went back for a whole week and worked house shows. Then I worked around Pittsburgh because Bruno had an interest in that promotion on weekends. And Jim Grabmeyer from Ohio would go to Charlotte every summer because they would expand their roster with outdoor shows. And he went down, and all of a sudden I got a phone call. He said, you said this was your dream, and they're looking for people. And I gave him your picture, and based on my recommendation, you could be booked starting Monday. So, wow. I packed everything I owned in an old beat up Chevy and never been south of Richmond, Virginia. And I left at Niles, Ohio, drove to Charlotte, stayed at the Y right up the street from where Jim Sr. had his office. And that Monday night, I jotted the date down, was May 3rd, 1971. First match was in the Charlotte Park Center against Gene Anderson. And a lot of people, as you described me as the leader of the Four Horsemen, which was the pinnacle of my career, but I had 3,200 some professional matches over that 20-year period. In the first 5 years, I was a full-time wrestler until a phone call from Archie Goldie opened up that chapter as a manager. And
so what made you decide to go from being a manager in WCW to a front office position in WWF?
I actually, when I started that first time in the ring with Gene Anderson, I was 28 years old, closer to my 29th birthday. I was not a kid. So I knew that, yeah, I'm now living my dream, but I have to be realistic that at almost 29 years old, starting out full-time, my time as a full-time wrestler was going to be greatly limited because of my age. So I immediately focused a lot of attention on the business side of wrestling, television promotion, how to produce a TV show, how to do a TV show, how to book towns. And every place that I went, and I was around some of the great ones. I spent a year with the Funks in Amarillo. Then I went to Florida with Eddie Graham. And Eddie Graham, to me, I mean, I remember Eddie Graham from going to Madison Square Garden, seeing Dr. Jerry and Eddie Graham. And now I'm in Florida, and with his reputation as being one of the greatest minds in wrestling, and here I am able to get from him like a sponge. And I continued wrestling, and then I ended up back in the Carolinas with the Horsemen, and Tully and Arn were there, and I was managing them, and they had a chance to go to New York with Bobby the Brain Heenan and become the Brainbusters. And it was right when Crockett Promotions kind of was having some rocky times, and Turner brought the company and renamed it World Championship Wrestling to protect the programming that was still doing great ratings. And it was like November of '88, I want to say. And Tully called me a week or two later, and he said, Well, we're up here, and already we realized that Vince and Pat Patterson are doing all the booking, and they need help. And your name has been mentioned and, as being somebody that's got good creative ideas, and you're an attention to detail person, and they're very interested in you, depending on what you got going. And so I called Terry Garvin, who was there, who I'd known Terry from working with him in Amarillo, working with him in Kansas City. He immediately, Pat Patterson was standing right there, put Pat on the phone. And I was going up to New York for the holidays with the one who became my third wife. And Vince got the message to me I was at the Marriott Marquis in Manhattan. He said, we're going to send a car down. And Vince wanted me to meet him in his home. And I went up to Greenwich, met Vince in his home. He said, the reason we're meeting here is I don't want to put you on the spot. And he offered me a job with the understanding that I would walk off camera, which is to answer your question. He said, I'm not interested in you as an on-camera character or personality. And at that point, I was like almost 44 years old. So I thought, well, how many more times can I go in the ring for a special match with Precious Paul Ellering? The timing was great. And I'm looking, title of my book, if you look at my my autobiography, it's Wrestlers Are Like Seagulls, but the subtitle is From McMahon to McMahon. And it refers to a comment. If you read in the book, you'll see, where that title came from. But McMahon to McMahon was also a reference to my career. Vince McMahon Sr. as a referee, and now here I am all these years later. Vince McMahon Jr. is recruiting me, if I want to step off camera and come to work for him. And he met me in his home, and he said, if you want to go back and use me as leverage and tell him we talked and get the best deal you can with the new company, because Turner just bought it. Or he said, I hope you'll accept my offer. And he made me a very attractive offer. And he said, let me sleep on it overnight. And then first thing in the morning, I called, and I started, I needed a couple of days off, and started with him in, I think it was February of '89. So McMahon to McMahon is really the story of my career. And I went to work for Vince in the front office and basically disappeared off camera.
Wow. And how did you find that transition? I mean, so you really, I think what's informed your perspective, which is great, is you started off as a fan. I mean, a super fan, went to, reffing matches, working inside the ring, working as a manager. I mean, which do you enjoy the most out of all these aspects and elements of your varied and storied career?
Glenn, I enjoyed every aspect of it. And I kind of look and figure, okay, as a referee for 8 years, when I stepped into the ring, both as a babyface and as a heel during that 5-year period of time, I was a better wrestler because of my 8 years as a referee with top talent. And then when I had a chance, because of a phone call that I didn't expect, and in life, as one door is closing behind you, another door is opening in front of you. And I never really did think about managing, but I also looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, hey, you're not a gym rat. You don't have a Lex Luger, Superstar Graham, Hulk Hogan type of body. I'm tall and in the ring look bigger than I probably was. I was 6'1" something and probably 225, but looked bigger. And I thought, this is a natural transition, because what I had concentrated the most on was what I thought was my strongest asset, was my interviews. And I really worked in preparation to the point that I developed, I thought, a skill of being able to give the impression that it was an impromptu interview, that I had never had any notes or contemplated, where really in my mind, I almost memorized it in my mind by preparation. And of course, as I got more and more experience, I can't say that I never prepared. I think I prepared mentally for every interview, including this one. And I just always wanted to be the best that I could be. But as a manager, because I had been a referee, because I had worked in the ring, heel and babyface, as a manager, I feel that made me a better manager. And I remember Bobby Heenan one time told me, well, the whole secret is being able that when I did go in the ring after becoming a manager, you've had great foundation as a wrestler at 3,200 matches. So I could go in the ring if it came to, would my timing be as slick as a guy that was wrestling every night? No, but I could go in the ring and have a decent match that if fans were looking at me and say, oh, we thought he was a manager. We didn't know he knew how to wrestle. but the fan expectation with me as a manager changed my persona. When I did go in the ring, they didn't expect me to be a polished wrestler. And I was arrogant. I was boastful and not really liked by the fans. So when I went in the ring against the top babyface, they didn't expect me to. They expect me to get my butt kicked. And I had to learn, as Bobby Heenan said, you got to learn how now to wrestle like a manager. And I learned a tremendous lesson. I went to Houston and worked for Paul Bosch. One of the late Paul Bosch was probably one of the, along with Sam Muchnick, they were two of the greatest promoters ever in the industry. And Paul paid very well, and everybody wanted to be there. And I was working in Dallas, and you would work for Von Erichs in the Dallas area, work for Joe Blanchard around San Antonio, Corpus Christi. And then if you were fortunate, you were figured in with Paul Bosch. And I remember Gino Hernandez was active at that time, and Paul really, really had a liking for Gino Hernandez and a personal interest in having him be the biggest star he could be. And it led to a confrontation where I was forced to go in the ring with Gino Hernandez. And I'd been around as a manager for about 6 months. And I'm sitting, and this is, I will admit before I tell you what happened, it's one of the few times in my career where maybe I never thought, I think everybody has to have an ego if you have success in the business, but I was never consumed by an ego. I always held it in check. But that night I'm looking around and I think, a lot of these guys, I've been manager for 6 months, and a lot of these guys have forgot that, hey, I put the tights on. I was a credible worker. So I went out there to wrestle Gino Hernandez with that mindset. And I went out, and was my timing exactly? No, but it was close. And boy, I was coming back to the dressing room all full of myself. What a great match I had, until I opened the door and I looked at Paul Bosch, and the expression on his face told me that you better wipe that smile off of your face. And Paul impressed upon me that, and I respect him for his honesty, that he said, you went out there tonight and you did not give the fans what they anticipated. You went around with your own agenda to prove something to the guys in the dressing room, and those fans bought tickets to see you go out there, fumble and stumble, not as a polished wrestler, and to go out and get your butt kicked, and you didn't deliver. And I wasn't standing as tall with that conversation. I was shrinking, but I thank Paul Bosch for his honesty, and I never forgot those words. And every time after that, as a manager, when I went in the ring, according to Bobby Heenan, I wrestled like a manager, because that's what the fans expected. And that took a lot of ability too. Yeah.
Exactly. And just like any business, you continue to learn, just like podcasting, media, whatever. We continue to learn every day, anything you do in life. But moving from the business side to maybe the more fun side of, say, the Four Horsemen, can you give us one slightly PG rated Ric Flair story that comes to mind? Especially for me, I'm a Carolina boy. Maybe that happened in the Carolinas.
Oh, man. Really put me on the spot. And that reminds me, I'm not here to plug a lot of things, but Dick Bourne recently put out a book called The Four Horsemen, and it is a timeline history. It's not a behind the scenes thing. And he sent me a copy, and I've looked through it, and it really traces the Four Horsemen back before I became part of it, which started with the Andersons, and then Tully came in, and I was managing Tully. And then the Four Horsemen were, and this is true with a lot of the great success stories in wrestling, was not a creative idea that somebody had. Say, oh, we're going to put these guys together and you can manage them, and we'll call you the Four Horsemen. Arn Anderson went out on a market-specific interview, and we don't have a copy of that tape because we can't even remember which interview it was. But it was probably a market where the TV was airing and we didn't have a specific local show to promote. So we would have to still fill those two spots. So they could take all of us and go out there and just talk in general. and Flair was the world champion. Ole and I think Ole and Arn were world tag team champions. Tully was the national champion. I managed Tully. So we all went out. And Arn looked at the camera, everybody with the gold belts over their shoulders. And he said, you people that are watching at home, take a good look at your picture. Here's all of the champions, all the gold, all the bragging rights. And to have so few dominate everybody else in the industry, you'd have to go back in your history books to the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse and put up the four fingers. Well, all of a sudden we didn't think anything of it. We start going out and people yelling, Four Horsemen, Four Horsemen. I remember Jimmy Crockett a couple weeks later said, what's this Four Horsemen thing I keep hearing about? I don't know, Jimmy, it's something that the fans picked up on and they're the ones running with it. And I think maybe somebody ought to pay some attention. And that's how it started. And we never in our wildest imagination ever thought that it would become as big as it became or last as long as it did.
Sure. And let me ask you this too. Did the Four Horsemen take their titles with them everywhere they went on the town the night after the show?
Yeah. Well, I mean, did Flair wear the world title belt into the local watering hole? No.
Okay.
But he didn't have to. He always dressed to the nines. And we used to have to, like, we were anxious to get out of the dressing room. And Flair would take forever, because he wore a shirt, tie, and a jacket. And till he got dressed and we got to go wherever we were going to go, we would get to the hotel, run up to our rooms, open our bags, take everything and towels and things that were, spread them out to dry. And it would be like a race to get to the local bar, which was oftentimes in the hotel where we were staying. And of course, Flair had an act on the interviews for that specific market, say, and after you can come join us because the night's going to end with a final bell. You can come to, whatever the watering hole was, whether it was a hotel or what. And we would get to, and if we were in Chicago, it was down on Rush Street. We used to go to a place called the Snuggery, which I'm sure doesn't exist anymore. It's probably changed names 10 times, but we would pull up in the limo and there would be a line down the block to try and get in the place because they'd have a limit how many people come in there. And man, we get the red carpet treatment. We would come in, and all the times we went there, I don't think I ever saw a tab. We'd say, hey, where's my tab? They said, well, you don't have one. It's either been taken care of or everybody that's in here bought you guys all your drinks. And it was a good time to answer your question. And to come up with a Flair story, man, that's tough. He tells one story, and I think he told it when we were inducted into the Hall of Fame in Miami, the WWE Hall of Fame. And we lived in Charlotte at the time. I was married to my second wife. Flair was married at the time, and we would race back from wherever we were. And if it was close by, a TV like in Rock Hill or something, we could get to the local Bennigan's, well before closing time, get in there and have, as it goes, line some drinks up at the bar. And we got ready to leave, and Rick and Beth, his wife at the time, got in an argument about something, and she put her purse down, and Rick football kicked it out the front door, and that's it. His wife, but that's it. I'm going home, and I'm taking the baby, who is Charlotte. Ashley is her legal name. Was I could hold her in my hand at that point. She was in a crib to sleep with a babysitter, and Rick says, come on, let's go. We got to beat him there. I jump in the car. Rick jumps in with me, and we broke all the speed limits, I'm sure, and got to the house before the girls did. Open the doors. Rick runs in the house. I'm waiting behind the thing with the engine running. Rick goes upstairs, tells the babysitter to go home, and there's the baby sleeping so soundly in the crib. Rick just curls underneath the crib and falls sound asleep. Next thing I know, there's daylight. And all of a sudden Rick's there. Hey, engine's still running. What happened, engine? What do you mean what happened? Well, didn't you see anybody leave? No. And Rick said, the baby's gone. So he jumped in. We're going to go back to my house, and I go in first, and I'm in there for a couple of minutes. I think I had to drop Rick off to get his car. So I got home first to my house, and I walk in, and of course Beth's there with the baby and my wife, and she's cooking breakfast. And Rick is a few minutes later, and as Rick tells the story, as he walked in the front door of my house, off to the left, you could see into the kitchen, and the kitchen was like a great room to the seating area to eat. And there's my wife flipping eggs and bacon or whatever, and she's reading the riot act to me about how terrible we had misbehaved the night before. And Rick is expecting, as he tells the story, me to be standing there at attention taking this browbeating. And when Rick walked over and peeked around the corner, head down on the table, sound asleep, oblivious to the whole thing. That's a PG story, and the others, God, I don't think I could tell any of the others. And if I did tell you, I'd have to kill you.
Well, there you go.
A lot of people are asking in the chat if you can still keep in touch with any of the Horsemen.
Yeah, I talk to Rick at least a couple times a year, especially during the holidays, and he does a lot of appearances. And if he's anywhere near me, you know, I'll go see him. Sometimes it's a surprise, and I might be a guest there too. And he's always been fun to be around. And he, after all these years, as many appearances as he does, there's always a line out because he's very fan friendly, and they all want his autograph, and they all want a picture taken with him. And he just, you know, and he flirts with all the girls, and the girls think that's the greatest, and the guys aren't offended because somebody's flirting with their girlfriend or their wife, and they're not mad at Rick because they want to be like Rick. So he's just incredibly popular. I'm always happy to see him. Arn is on the road with the WWE as an agent, so he has a busy schedule, and he gets like one weekend off a month or something. And I never call him when he's home because a lot of times he and Aaron will go away somewhere, take a cruise or something. And if he is at a local event, I'm in Delaware, and sometimes they'll go to University of Delaware Carpenter Center. And if he's up there, it's not that, 45-minute drive, I'll go up there to see him, or up in Philly. And then Tully, we talk, and also Arn will do some appearances. I recently saw him. He did something in Richmond, and I was there too. And it was great to have a couple hours sitting next to him, just talking old stories and just being around him. And same thing with Tully. Barry, you don't see as often. Barry's kind of a very private person, but we're close, all of us. And I still talk to Ole. Ole's health is not the best. He's wheelchair bound, has MS, and needs care 24 hours a day, and has somebody there that has been there through thick and thin through all the years. But you talk to Ole on the phone, you would never know. It's the same old gruff Ole on the phone. And like I say, our friendship goes back to 1971 when I first went to Charlotte and Ole was there. So yes, to answer your question, I don't see Luger that much, just at casual appearances, but certainly the other guys and Luger, no, but I do with Ole on the phone, and I don't get down to Atlanta very often. I haven't seen him for a while. He's come to a couple of the fan fests with the Greg Price, and I always look forward to seeing Ole. And then I do see Barry from time to time. We'll do appearances together. We've actually, in 25 years, I think there's only 2 times that all 5 of us have been together. One time was in Charlotte, where also Luger was there too, and Ole and Barry. So you talk about a Horseman reunion. That was a total Horseman reunion, including Flair, but they're few and far between.
Wow. I did want to ask you too, regarding when you were working with WCW in the late 90s, and Ric Flair was having his issues with Eric Bischoff. How difficult was that, being so close to Rick, and then also, working as an executive with WCW during that time?
It was very difficult. I've always had the philosophy, if I work for you and you're signing the checks, I have a loyalty to you. In that case, I don't remember that Eric was actually signing the checks, but if he was, it wasn't his check. It was Turner's check. They owned WCW. And he and Eric and Flair got crosswise. He fired Flair, sent him home, wanted to fire Arn. And I convinced him that Arn was so valuable to us. I had to take one thing at a time, and convinced him that it would be a huge business mistake to let Arn go, and that he would have a hard time explaining it to people above him why he let Arn go. Arn was that valuable a commodity. So he backed off from that. And then little by little, I arranged for Flair to come down and have a meeting, and I was kind of the peacemaker, go between, and same thing with Flair. You want to lose Flair. He's a commodity back then, but it was it was a rocky road, to say the least, because Eric was not. He wasn't the wrestling person that everybody at WCW and at TBS hierarchy thought he was. He was carried coffee for Vern Gagne. That was his foundation in the wrestling business. And when I first got hired, I needed a job. I left Vince in my own volition after I'd been there 7, not quite 8 years. Walked out. I had young kids. I had to have a job with benefits. And I had Shivani call Eric, and he said, yeah, Eric wants to meet with you. And when I went to see Eric Bischoff for the first time, never met him before, the first thing he talked about was not what I could help him. And I'm not talking about proprietary information, specific numbers, guys, earnings, that kind of thing, but the philosophy of how Vince built talent and structured his television show. All Eric wanted to talk about was, how much longer can he stay in business? I'm going to put him out of business. What other matches has he got to go with? And I just sat and listened. And I didn't want to say to him, because I needed a job, Eric, if you think you're going to put Vince McMahon out of business, you're crazy. Vince was a third generation wrestling 24/7. WCW was a division of a broadcast company, and which eventually happened when Eric finally ran it into the ground, was reckless with the guaranteed contracts, reckless with the production costs of the television shows. That, I mean, eventually all of a sudden, when the good times were good, everybody at the suits at TBS was smiling and thought, oh, well, we got a guy in Eric that was kind of a TV guy, worked for Vern Gagne, and a wrestling guy too, and he must be doing great. And then when it nosedive and all of a sudden they're losing $5 million a month, and then projected to lose $5 million more the next month and the next month, $60 million losses for that year and another 60 next year, all of a sudden everybody stood to attention and said, what's going on? And started asking questions. And that was the beginning of the end. And, Eric was his own worst enemy.
Yeah.
No, sorry, Raj, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Chris.
JJ, you're a multi-time Hall of Famer across your storied career. Is there one particular Hall of Fame, whether it be WWE, the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, the Tragos and Thesz, or even the Cauliflower Alley Club, that either has a special place in your heart or means just maybe a touch more than the other?
Glenn, I've received numerous honors, and then you'd say, oh, well, yeah, what he's going to say that everyone is so meaningful. But generally, I have to go back to that picture from 60 years ago as a kid that started as a fan, had a fan club, dreamed of getting into wrestling, refereed for 8 years, got my chance to put the tights on. 5 years later, I get a chance to manage. And when it's all over, when I wrote my autobiography in 2005, my Hall of Fame, my first Hall of Fame was 2012 with the WWE in Miami when the Horsemen were inducted. Mm-hmm. And I wear this ring very proudly. And prestige-wise, when I wear both of my Hall of Fame rings, the first one they look at, and if your hands were here and I could put them in, the weight of this one with the gold in it and the value of it in terms of appraisal is half again more than this. But the fans look at this because they see the WWE logo. And you look at who preceded me back to Andre the Giant as the first one. It's the perception. Now, I'm the first one to admit, if you ask me what's the process by which you guys were chosen, I'd have to say, well, I guess it comes down to one person makes that decision, and a lot of it's a business decision, what's going to put asses in seats on the night before WrestleMania when we have a separate ticket to see the Hall of Fame induction. That's just being brutally honest. But that doesn't diminish the fact that I'm proud. The WWE brought all of my children in, 2 rooms, first-class hotel. My son, who is handicapped, and Miami, actually, when I got the call, I had already signed a contract with Sal Corrente to do something that Mike Graham had which was a Championship Wrestling from Florida reunion out at Miami Beach that same weekend. And I had signed to be there as a guest and to do a signing. And when I got the call that we were being inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame that weekend, I said, oh man, I don't want to break the news to you, but I signed a contract for Saturday morning to be in Miami Beach. And the first words were, well, you know how Vince is. He hates for anybody else to be coattailing on the fact that WrestleMania is there. And I said, oh, please, I don't want to hear that. I don't want anybody to, I can't tell you what this means to me and my family. And it ended up, there was a gal named Kristen Altman who still works there, and she's moved up the ladder in positions, and she was the point person. And I told her, she said, don't worry. This is going to be a weekend like you'll never forget. And it was true. Everything, I said, when I was approached the first time, I think I had to sign a contract. I got a payoff, and there was going to be you and another guest, or two guests could come, first class tickets from wherever. And I said, well, I already got a ticket to go down there by Sal Corrente. Can I bring my 4 children? And they're happy to ride coach with me. Not a problem. So we got tickets for my kids. I said, now, since there's, 5 of us, the one room, no problem, 2 rooms. And then when we got down there, my daughter from my first marriage, Pam, found out about the thing with Miami Beach with Sal Corrente, and Bill Apter was going to be there. They were having a wrestling event and a bunch of guys signing, some of which were WWE Hall of Famers. So she said to me, well, can I ride with you over to Miami Beach? I'd love to see Bill Apter. I haven't seen him in all these years. So I went to Chris and I said, my daughter Pam wants to ride with me over there. I said, no problem, because we were going to send you and an intern to be with you, stand by, make sure you got out and come back in time for rehearsals. And I said, I was going to call Sal and see if I could get a car. She said, no, we've arranged transportation for you and the intern, and there's room for your daughter. Well, my other 3 kids were there that I had with my 3rd marriage that, oh, you're going over to Miami Beach. Oh, that's where we wanted to go. We wanted to go down to the beach. So I went back to Kristen. I said, Kristen, got another little problem. I said, I got 3 more that want to go with me. She said, don't worry, I will arrange transportation. And I said, well, Jeffrey's in a wheelchair. He's handicapped. She said, well, do you need one of those vans with a lift? We'll get a vehicle like they use for courtesy vehicles to go to a rental car from the airport. No. He can transfer into a car. Get up the next morning, walk outside. There's a stretch black limo.
Nice.
And the limo took us over to Miami Beach, parked outside and sat there for the whole time that I was there. The intern stuck with me. My daughter Pam was with Bill Apter having a wonderful time. I could look out the big window where we were signing and see my kids down at the beach frolic in the water. And then the intern went down and rounded them up when we were supposed to leave and come back. So in terms of a memorable weekend, if you go onto my website, jjdillon.com, there is a banner off on the right that's WWE Hall of Fame. And you click on that, and there's a bunch of pictures from that weekend. And it's memories that I will cherish forever. I have my Hall of Fame plaque up here on the wall, pictures from that weekend. The WWE sent a huge thing with all of us on the stage Friday night. There's a little mini picture of us out at WrestleMania. To go to American Airlines Arena the night before WrestleMania and have 15,000 people sold out to see, and again, it wasn't just the Horsemen. It was Edge. It was Iron Mike Tyson was the celebrity guy. Yokozuna posthumously. Ron Simmons, the great Ron Simmons, a runner-up for the Heisman Trophy as an athlete. And for us to walk out on that stage at American Airlines Arena and get a standing ovation when the Horsemen all went out, and here's 15,000 people with a symbol of excellence. You talk about goosebumps. And then the next day, at the middle of the stadium with 75,000 people, they showed a package from the night before that Howard Finkel voiced over, and meanwhile they rolled out a carpet with stars in it and put us out. Next they came back live, and there we're all standing. Now we got 75 people standing ovation doing this. Again, you talk about goosebumps. When I came back from that weekend, I thought the one thing about the WWE, when they do something, they do it right. And it's a memory that I'll never, ever forget. And then the other ring was, by contrast, it was the following year, 2013. And that's when Tony Villano, who started the only true professional wrestling legitimate Hall of Fame with a process by which there was ballots and voting to be picked. The difference is that there is a legitimate process that is listed, and it's an honor to be on the ballot, let alone have people, your peers in the business, vote for you and feel that you're worthy of this. And the induction in those days was up in Amsterdam, New York. Only 250 people there. It's filled where they're having a dinner. And that was just as meaningful to me. I have those pictures up on the wall. Bill Watts was there, Baron Raschke, Tito Santana, Joe Hamilton, one of the original assassins. We were all part of that class along with Joyce Grable, who had been in a battle fighting cancer. And it was those memories I treasure, again, because I know the process, and I got the best of both worlds. I got the prestigious ring that everybody first looks at, and then when they focus on the other one and realize that it's a legitimate Hall of Fame and only brick and mortar museum devoted to professional wrestling, man, I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
JJ, I did want to ask you one last question. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. But I wanted to ask you about Ric Flair joining WWF in was it 1991? And you were working backstage, with Vince. Did you have anything to do with that? And what was that time period like? And lastly, were you disappointed they didn't do Ric Flair versus Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania? That match had already taken place. It wasn't like it was the dream match that never happened. And when I went to the WWE, I had been in all the regional territories, and I worked for some of the greatest minds in the business, and I had been involved in the creative side of it because I knew that was my longevity in the business. And I worked with talent travel. I worked with routing of towns. I dabbled in everything. Now I go to work for the WWE, and here are individual people, and all of them were not necessarily wrestling fans, that were executives in charge of all these little things that I used to do, wearing all these hats, and this is their full-time job. So, wow, this is on a whole much larger scale. And Vince was hands-on on everything. If there was a poster for an upcoming pay-per-view that had Hulk in the ring tearing his shirt, anybody that's ever looked at a shot of somebody in the ring, you never see every seat. Somebody either has to go to the bathroom or out to get popcorn. Vince would sit there and make sure that every one of those seats was filled in. That was his attention to detail. So I never ever thought that I had it all figured out and knew it all in the business. I was still learning. And when I went to work for Vince McMahon, he had his own philosophy. Not the easiest guy to work for, because that was his whole life. 24/7 was the wrestling business. And if he ever did anything else, and I never knew Vince to ever take a vacation, what he did was everything involved with wrestling. And he would go to the gym, pump iron, and you look at the people he pushed, the Hulk Hogans, the Ultimate Warriors, the Lex Lugers, they were all what? You looked at him, and that was Vince's vision of what he thought a professional wrestler should look like. And Vince prided himself in how hard he worked out in the gym. And even later in life, I'm told that he still pushes phenomenal weights to the point that he's blown out both shoulders, he's had a couple surgeries because Vince only knows one way to do it, and that's to push at 100% and then some beyond your limits. But he was a fascinating guy to be around. Learned a lot working for him. And like I say in my autobiography, Wrestlers Are Like Seagulls, McMahon to McMahon, that was the story of my career. From Vince Sr. as a referee in Eastern Pennsylvania to being recruited to work for Vince and being with him for 8 years. And then I left and went to work thought I'd retire with WCW. Never thought that with Eric Bischoff there, he would run it in the ground. And all of a sudden after 5 years, because it was a division of a company that wasn't going to absorb sustained losses, and they pulled the plug. Now I'm 61 years old, spent greater part of my life in a niche business. And now what do? Went through a divorce, and I moved back to Delaware.
I was out of a job, and my mother was living. My father had passed 2000, and my mother said in 2003, come on up here to Delaware. She had a home that paid for. You can help take care of me. So I moved up here. And the first 2 years I did work for Jerry Jarrett and stayed in Atlanta. He had a construction business, and they were building he lived in Nashville, didn't want to move down. I could work from my home, and they built a high school, and I think they were reimaging all the Amoco stations to BP. That lasted about 2 years. Then that ended. I'm out of work again. That's how I ended up coming to Delaware. And I came here, and I had kids late in life. I had twins when I was 50, and my last one, I was 52 when she was born. I had to have benefits and take care of them. And everywhere I went to look for a job, they all knew who I was, and they looked at the money that I made. And they thought, oh, you're not going to be happy here. We'd love to hire you, but. And I finally saw an ad in the newspaper in Delaware for, of all things, a job fair for Department of Corrections. And I went to the job fair, took the test, passed it with a great score. They had panel meetings of anybody that passed the score, looked at me, and they all knew who I was. And the age was not a factor with the state. Nobody else would hire me and say age because they thought you'd sue them, but the state didn't care. So at the age of 61, 61, I got hired into the Department of Correction, went through the academy for 9 weeks. And when I look back, I just retired December 1st of this last year after 12 years, I think, and 11 months of service. And it was a whole different experience for me. I went to the prison, and you never know what's on the other side of that wall till you venture in there. And it's a whole different world, different culture. They have their own system, monetary system. They pay debts with their soups and things that they get from commissary, and they have their own code of conduct. And I never had any problem because, they knew who I was and recognized me. And I realized that as in the wrestling business, when you get beyond the wrestling business, to get respect, you have to give respect. And I did, and never had any problems. And now I look back at this point in my life, I've had 2 successful careers. My passion is still there for wrestling. Next week, a week from today, a week from tomorrow, I'll be getting on a plane to go up to Waterloo, Iowa. This will be my 3rd year going up there for the George Tragos Lou Thesz Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. And I was honored there last year. I got the Lou Thesz World Heavyweight Championship Award presented to me by Charlie Thesz, Lou's widow, personally handed it to me. I see the award up here on my wall, a picture of it I'm very proud of. This year, Magnum TA is getting the Lou Thesz Award. And it's in the Dan Gable Museum in Waterloo, Iowa. And you still got time to make plans to go up there. Anybody who's a wrestling fan, it has to be on your bucket list to go to Waterloo, Iowa, to the Dan Gable Museum. And when I first went up there 3 years ago, took my son with me because he wrestled as an amateur in spite of his disability. And I said, I wrestled in college, but wasn't very good. And I say the best amateur wrestler in our family is my son, even though he's handicapped in a wheelchair. And he went up there and met Dan Gable. And you would think, as a wrestling fan, the first time you met Hulk Hogan, that's how he felt about meeting Dan Gable, who was a very, very humble individual. Kyle Klingman is the director up there. Rob Schamberger, who does all the artwork for the WWE, painted a mural. And when I walked through the door of the Dan Gable Museum, there's Rob Schamberger putting the finishing touches on a mural that was 8 feet tall, probably 10, 12 feet long. There's a likeness of Lou Thesz, Kurt Angle, Danny Hodge, and it just took your breath away. And when you walked into the Tragos Thesz pro wrestling wing in the Dan Gable Museum, there's paintings that Rob Schamberger did of anybody that's ever been honored or recognized, including mine. And nobody ever did a portrait of me before.
Nice.
And it took my breath away. And he does these for everybody and donates them. So here's all these individual portraits. And I become a huge fan of Rob Schamberger. And finally, I think it was a year ago, I said to him, Rob, I said, this one's here, but at home, I would love to have, nobody's ever painted my portrait. And I probably couldn't afford to pay you what it would probably cost to do it. And Rob said, no, he said, I would be honored to do it for all that you've given to the business. And he said, there's no way in the world you could pay for it. Wow. And so I've had to wait a year. He sent me, it's been posted on Facebook, the first rough draft of, he usually takes a picture, does the outline, and then as I've seen, he starts to put the colors in, and wow, it comes to life. And then I saw the final picture, and I'm dressed, and you see my Hall of Fame rings, and it's been shipped, and I wait for the doorbell to ring every day for the package to finally get here, and I'm going to have it professionally framed, mounted and framed, and in a place of honor on my wall. That's how big a fan I am of Rob Schamberger. So nice. I'm going to Waterloo. If you're a wrestling fan, you got to put that on your bucket list. And it's July 21, 22 in Waterloo. Dan Gable Museum, fabulous place. Dan is a wonderful person. He just published another book this year, which I want to get a signed copy. I see they got a new T-shirt. I go up there like a fan. I go in there with money in my pockets and say, what's here that I have things here that are my memories. And they actually did a thing to raise funds where an artist did a singlet of Dan Gable. They had 4 limited editions of 100 each. I got one of them, and I had it framed, and it's on my wall. So I'm probably one of the biggest Dan Gable fans in the world. When I went last year, Kurt Angle was there because he hadn't been able to get his ring. And so I had some pictures with my son with Kurt Angle and with Dan Gable, and it's among my proudest possessions. And then I know it's getting ahead a little bit. I just got a couple things where I am going in August, which is a little bit away, but the weekend of 11, 12, 13th of August, I'm going to one CW event in East Stroudsburg, and Sean Hardy, who's a Delaware native and a friend of mine, he's promoting the event up there in East Stroudsburg at the St. Paul's Lutheran Church, and I'm appearing there Friday night. And then Bud Carson, who has a store up in Allentown, and he's been a friend of wrestling for forever, it seems, and he brings guys into the store to sign. On that Sunday, I'm going to be making an appearance at the Bud Carson's store up in Allentown. And the night before, there's an Icons of Wrestling convention in Philadelphia at the $2,300 arena, not dollar, arena in Philadelphia, big arena. Jim Ross is there. I saw the Rock and Roll Express, Jerry Lawler, a bunch of guys there, Animal, and I'm going to be at Bud Carson's table signing. So it's going to be a busy weekend for me. But first things first, I'm really, really excited about going to Waterloo. And if you're a wrestling fan, man, you got to put it on your bucket list to come to Waterloo.
Absolutely.
Very, very good. Well, JJ, it was an honor to have you on our show today, and we appreciate you joining us. I just want to remind everybody about your brand new show, who just started a few weeks ago on the Major League Wrestling Radio website, which is MLWradio.com. The JJ Dillon Show comes out every Thursday, I believe you said on episode 4, alongside co-host Rich Bocchini.
Yes.
Yep. All that some of our viewers may know as Rich Brennan from his time in WWE. But also, quick reminder of his appearances that you just ran down as well. He'll be in Waterloo July 21st and 22nd for the Tragos and Thesz Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame Induction Weekend at the Dan Gable Museum. And then in August, he'll be in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania on Friday, August 11th. And then on August 12th at Bud Carson's table at the Icons of Wrestling show at the 2300 Arena in Philly. And then on the 13th, Merchant Square Mall for the Bud Carson Pro Wrestling World Store signing from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. And JJ, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us. I just want to
mention, too, that I will have copies of my book and signed copies in Waterloo, and at all 3 appearances I'll bring them. And Dick Bourne has been kind enough to send some copies of a book that I love. I signed them, and they're available too. So
excellent.
I will have them. If those of you that haven't gotten it, the book is 2005, already in discussions with Scott Teal at Crowbar Press, who has published everything. He did Ole before me, and he's done Stan Hansen and Tony Atlas and all kinds of books on wrestling. He's done a complete history of matches from Madison Square Garden, which I've yet to get my copy. So Scott Teal, respected historian, go to Crowbar Press, and not only there you can find my book and how to acquire it, but all the other publications that he does. And again, Dick Bourne with the Four Horsemen. I think you can find that book on Amazon.com. But come see me in Waterloo, or come see me at the 3 appearances up in Pennsylvania. I'll have copies, signed copies that you could get, and always love seeing the fans and talking wrestling. Never get tired of that. And I appreciate Raj and Chris and Glenn, you guys inviting me to be on your show. They say you're the oldest and largest wrestling website, right? Have I got that right?
That is correct.
And to be on this podcast thing is a whole new thing for me. So episode 4 coming up, Court Bauer talked me into doing it. And with Rich Bocchini, he makes me so comfortable. It's like just two guys sitting and having a conversation about wrestling, and fans could go on Twitter and give their feedback, what they liked, what they didn't like. And we so far have been getting 5-star ratings with each episode, and the numbers compared to other established podcasts, Court Bauer is thrilled to death. I am too. And as always, I thank the listeners that not only follow your website and your podcasts that are allowing me to come into your homes today to see me and have me talk with you guys, but check out the JJ Dillon Show on the MLW Network. We're having a lot of fun with it, and I think the wrestling fans would enjoy the conversation. We talk about a myriad of topics. A lot of it has been things that are in my book, but now you're hearing it from me, and you're hearing it in a lot more detail.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. JJ Dillon Podcast. Check it out. Everybody. All
right. And to all the fans out there, you supported me my whole career, and without you, the fans, there'd be no professional wrestling. There'd have been no Four Horsemen. There'd have been no JJ Dillon. So thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to move on to the SmackDown review. And JJ, if you hit the red button, that should log you off. And thank you so much. I would love to have you on again.
Okay. I don't know where the red button is. That the phone?
Yep.
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Perfect.
And I'm about to hop on a conference call with Jeff Jarrett. We'll have highlights of that here on Wrestling this afternoon. So I'm going to have to bow off again for the SmackDown review. But next week, I'm going to try to do it. If there's no other interviews and stuff. So, but you guys take it away. Cool.
Thanks, Raj. So yeah, that was great. Chris, so let's talk about SmackDown last night and a little bit about talking smack. So opened the show last night with the news that AJ Styles, the new U.S. champion, having won from Kevin Owens at a Madison Square Garden live event the previous Friday. And AJ Styles came out and brought back the United States Challenge. Same open challenge that John Cena, of course, so memorably did during his run. And, of course, John Cena came out to answer that challenge. Had a little promo off between the two guys in the ring, setting up, maybe something in the future. Obviously, their mutual respect for one another. And, of course, before they could really get to a match, they were interrupted by Kevin Owens and Rusev setting up a tag for later in the night. Chris, to start with, what do you think about this title change? And AJ is the U.S. champ now, taking the belt off Kevin.
I think it was done well, basically because now you have everybody buying tickets for live events because they give the sort of the situation that anything can happen. Yes, I realize it was MSG. They want to give something special to that crowd, but it also gave them a chance to put this segment on the next week's SmackDown because they teased the absolute crap out of it with the Cena AJ match, and we were all giddy. And then Owens came out like a true heel and interrupted, and we got the tag match later, which was fine. But this was really good booking, I think, to get the championship back on the Styles. It gives another layer of character work for Owens, and it gave us a heck of a tease for another potential, 5-star type match.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had the experience of seeing that news Friday. I think immediately after we got it was almost exactly coincided with finishing watching the Kevin Owens documentary on the new Kevin Owens DVD that came out. And it's really interesting to watch that documentary, how it talks about the WWE sort of finally begrudgingly coming to believe in him and give him these opportunities. Mm-hmm. And then it was very funny to just see that news immediately after, like, oh, and he just lost the title at a house show.
Well, I mean, like I said, it makes people potentially buy tickets to those house shows now because of that perception. And again, it's MSG. It's the most storied arena in the country, or one of them, and it has a huge wrestling history. So I think, did they also maybe make a knee-jerk reaction to some of the stuff going on as far as maybe with Omega and all that fun stuff with the U.S. title? I mean, do you see any coinciding with some of the booking at other promotions, or whether it be even the All-Star game for Major League Baseball last night? They booked, Styles and Cena in the first few minutes to get you hooked.
Yeah. No, I think they somebody internally maybe said, you know what, we got to push AJ, we got to do something to stoke this. Let's front and center AJ and Cena as the baby faces of SmackDown, because Randy Orton's not bringing in the viewers. We've got, you know, the heel champs in the tag division in the for the for the heavyweight championship. And, you know, I'm not sure what they're doing with Naomi as the women's champ. I don't know what's going on with the women's division. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. I could see them making the decision and saying, you know what, let's put AJ and Cena as the headline of the show, and just keep people tuning in through, you know, until SummerSlam.
Right. And it's crazy that the U.S. title really is taking precedent to the World Heavyweight title right now. It's almost like those feuds. Those feuds should almost be flipped. Maybe Orton and Mahal, it'll be more believable as Mahal as the U.S. champion, and more believable maybe for, you know, Cena and Styles to be at the World Championship level. To me, you would almost flip the belts on each feud, and it would make more sense. But if it gives more credence to the U.S. title, I'm completely fine with it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting just to see the way that it's going right now, because it seems like there were no rush to get that belt off of Jinder. Same with Naomi. Like, just settle in. This is where it's going to be. And maybe the U.S. championship is going to be the one with a little hot potatoing between now and SummerSlam. Plus, I don't know if this struck you as a surprise, but the fact that, you know, during Great Balls of Fire, we got him saying, hey, Battleground's coming up 2 weeks from tonight. Mm-hmm. Usually they try and space these out a little bit more, but I think they're trying to get that out of the way so they have a nice month-long runway in between Battleground and SummerSlam. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy that, you know, we got these pay-per-views coming up so quick, and I think they have to do something to build more anticipation for it. So last night's opening, you know, was certainly that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, after that, we had teasing Baron versus Shinsuke, and they made Cena and Styles versus Rusev and Owens for the main event that night. But then we went to Jinder Mahal versus Ty Dillinger. Nice little showcase for Ty here. What did you think of this match?
I actually would have liked to seen Ty get a lot more offense in. It was pretty much a drubbing. I thought they would at least give Dillinger a little bit of shine. I mean, normally the guy who loses, now that they've come to this split screen thing, right? They transition to where the loser actually gets a little bit of work in during the commercial, and they're hoping that, you know, the people aren't seeing it because they're looking at the commercial and whatnot. But he pretty much got his butt kicked the whole time. I mean, he literally got a half dozen punches in, maybe a half a hope spot, but he didn't really hit any of his major offensive moves, which I was a little disappointed in.
You know, I think it's important, just give him the entrance, let the fans see him and get used to him. Yeah, it could have gone a little bit better, but hey, at least he's on TV. And I think that given just how on fire he was on Twitter with The Miz in the you know, days leading up to this, I'm glad we got to see him on TV. I'm glad they're at least thinking about him on a consistent basis. He's getting these backstage segments. He's getting some ring time. And this was more than the Aiden English, not even placeholder. A placeholder would be a step up for Aiden English at this point, considering how they're booking him.
Right, and how do you get a heel over? You put them with a popular baby face and let them kick their butt. And this is exactly what that was, because Dillinger's still over. Hasn't been on TV in weeks, besides, you know, like, what was it, a Sonic spot or something the other day, a couple weeks ago. But, you know, Dillinger is still over. The Tin Chan is still over. And it gives Mahal a little bit more credibility, just to pick up a good win.
Yeah. So after that, Jinder cut the same promo he's been cutting for the last 2 months. Just at this point, I mean, my brain goes on autopilot. I feel like we could have Jinder Mahal bingo. You know, it's like he's just going to hit the same points. Diversity, way I talk, way I look, billion people in India. Exactly. It's all, you know, the same thing. And he's getting better with it. But man, okay, now that he's kind of mastering this, let's give him something new. Let's add a new wrinkle to it. You know,
and there will be next week, because the Punjabi prison will be at SmackDown. And that's I feel bad for the production crew next week. That's pretty much where my sympathy lies at this point, because if I remember correctly, that's not the easiest looking structure to either move or build or anything, because it's like dual layered, right? And
steel reinforced bamboo, because that's the thing.
Or bamboo reinforced steel, one of the two.
Yeah, one of the two. Something's reinforced. I think the bamboo. It's on the bamboo on the outside around steel.
Right. Okay. There you go.
I think that's the way they do it. You know, it's like you go on the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland. Same concept, you know, like it's really steel. We put some bamboo on it. It looks nice, you know, has a nice, yeah. So get hyped for the Punjabi prison match. You're going to see the Punjabi prison next week on SmackDown Live. So after that, Xavier Woods versus Jey Uso. We're in this stage of the keeping the tag feud going, of the redundant singles matches. Xavier Woods picked up a win. This do anything for you, Chris?
My favorite part of the match was Little Nate taking charge and throwing everybody out. And, you know, that sort of gave them a one-on-one. It made it a little more believable. There was no chicanery. And you also forget how decent, or actually good, that Xavier Woods is in the ring. That elbow is pretty much a coast to coast almost that he does. You know, he went 3/4 away down the side of the ring. But, you know, with that said, I hated that particular version of it because if you remember the Alberto Del Rio stomp finisher, where the guy actually has to physically hang on to the ropes and hold himself up, that's what that one was. And I'm like, oh, come on, guys. Let's use a little bit more logic. Let him just do a long distance elbow from the mat. Don't do the rope spot. That just put a little bit of corniness in there for me. But no, Woods is good in the ring. Sometimes we forget that until we see him in one-on-one action.
I think they really wanted to, you know, get those clips into the rap battle last week, get a little more mileage out of that, and try and keep this feud going for Battleground. Have to say this about Talking Smack. So I have a new addendum. I know we've said Talking Smack is always awesome when Daniel Bryan's on, not quite the same without him. I will say, having the Usos on as a guest on Talking Smack, even with Shane last night,
entertaining.
Really entertaining. The Usos are, now that The Miz is over on Raw. By the way, The Miz on Raw Talk this week. If you have not watched that, watch The Miz on Raw Talk. Best thing he's done since his Talking Smack promo last year. But yeah, the Usos, actually last night's Talking Smack I thought was pretty good. I thought the Usos absolutely elevated that, and John Cena was fantastic, especially at the end there when he just fully got loose with it. If you want to see John Cena get a little loopy, watch Talking Smack last night. And Sami Zayn was good. We'll talk a little bit about his segment in a moment on SmackDown Live. So, okay, backstage, so much. Carmella gave Shane McMahon something from her lawyer about James Ellsworth and his suspension, which Shane promptly tore up. And then for Battleground, oh my God, Chris, for the first time ever, all the SmackDown women, 5 of them, in an elimination match on a pay-per-view.
Never heard of this.
To determine the number 1 contender. Dear God.
Like, never heard of this style of match before. It's historic, as they would say.
Okay, so is this better or worse? I can't decide anymore. Is it better that all the women are in the same segment, essentially, every week, every pay-per-view, or is it better what Raw's doing and telling individual stories poorly? Like, I don't know which is better.
So here's the thing. If we look back at the brand split initially, SmackDown actually had 2 or 3 separate women's feuds going on at the very same time. Now, granted, that's when they had a little bit weaker male roster too. And now since they did the shakeup and whatnot, I think Raw's women's roster is a little bit better. So maybe there's a little less time to put 2 different segments on SmackDown for the women, because they need to fit Cena in now that he's back. They've got to do a world title program. They've got these new characters like the Canelli and stuff that they're trying to fit in. So there's only 2 hours of space to fit all that in. So it's probably easier, a little bit lazier, but easier booking-wise, just to give them 1 segment, and then maybe they'll branch off with the whole Tamina Lana thing in the next little few weeks, maybe after SummerSlam. But here's my thing with this. They said Naomi wasn't going to, or it appears not, defend her title until SummerSlam. That's about 46 days away. Where's that 30-day clause at, Glenn? It's got to be in that rule book somewhere, right?
Hey, man, you don't put a bunch of LED lights on a belt just to give it away in 2 weeks. Because, I mean, come on, Charlotte's winning that title. I mean, I think they're trying to delay the inevitable with this. And actually, I respect SmackDown Live's creative team for showing some restraint in not putting the belt on Charlotte right away. But, I mean, come on. Like, Naomi is competent in the ring. She's charismatic as hell, got an amazing entrance. People love having her as the champ, but her against Charlotte, unless Carmella interferes with that, and maybe that'll be what happened. happens. Maybe Carmella interferes, gets the belt at SummerSlam, and then Charlotte takes it off her at the next pay-per-view. But I just on the sheer fact they're not doing anything with Naomi as champion, aside from putting the lights on the belt. That's been the biggest piece of character development with her. I don't think she's long for that title, but it's not happening until SummerSlam. So, yeah, we'll see who gets #1 contendership at Battleground. My guess, my money's on Charlotte. Love for it to be Becky, but I just see where this is all going. Hope to be pleasantly surprised. Speaking of stuff for Battleground, Nakamura versus Baron Corbin last night didn't actually happen. Nakamura attacks Corbin.
Yeah, I mean, this is a new wrinkle because it actually shows a little emotion, a little aggressiveness from Nakamura, because he's just kind of been there and almost seemed to like enjoy his time on the main roster. And now he shows like, oh, this means something. And this guy has something maybe that I want and took away from me in that match. So the feud actually means a little something now. It gives a new little layer to the onion that is Shinsuke Nakamura. And, you know, you got to have layers, Glenn. You got to have layers.
Oh, yeah. He's a mystery wrapped in an enigma. I mean, clearly. I think Shinsuke's great. I think that this is how they keep it going. Better this than a lot of talky promos. So, yeah, I think it'll be a great match. You know, Shinsuke might need to launch off something to do that Kinshasa on Corbin, though. He's a little tall. Maybe Corbin can just lean down, you know, and take it. So Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch versus Natalya and Tamina Snuka. Hey, if you are not excited about seeing 5 of these women together at Battleground, what about seeing 4 of them in a tag match on SmackDown Live?
They have to condition us slowly. Start with 4, then 5, and then maybe we'll get a 6th. You know, random one. Who knows? Who knows?
Poor Lana. It just goes to show they don't believe. I mean, because Tamina and Lana would have made a hell of a lot of sense given how they set up the story and the pairing of the 2 of them. But they were like, no, look, we need Natalya in the ring on this one with Tamina. But Tamina and Natalya did get the win. I thought it was an okay match, you know. But it's hard to maintain enthusiasm.
Yeah, at least Lana got out there and you know, distracted the finish. You know, we didn't get to really hear her catchy theme song, but other than that, you know, she was involved in the finish, so she's still relevant into that equation. So they didn't completely leave her out of the segment, which I thought was good.
Did you see that video someone posted on Twitter, and I think it's on YouTube now, of the guy that makes up the theme music for the Lana thing? And it's just, you know, I'm dancing on a chair. I'm dancing on a chair. He's just singing it along with it. It's very cute. I saw it on Twitter, but now I think it every time I hear Lana's theme music. Yeah, it's something else. Best part about Lana, the entrance music and her look. And she looks like $1 million until she starts wrestling, which is unfortunate because the women's division is surprisingly.
She's competent in the ring. She's not garbage at all.
She's not garbage,
she's competent.
But the drop off, though. I mean, we talked about this at that, you know, her first title match against Naomi, when she came in and did the attack and was holding up the belt, and the belt matched her dress, and she had that swagger. Like, all of us believed it. Like, oh shit, Lana could be the women's champion.
Right.
You know, she could do this. And then you saw the match and it was like, okay, Lana's not going to be the women's champion.
It's like now she's being like putting under the mother's wing of Tamina and Natalya in a sense now, which is kind of neat in a way, but kind of weird too.
What was Meltzer's quote? So everybody look up Meltzer's quote on Tamina and Lana. I'm not going to repeat it, but I thought it was funny. Just that, because I think a lot of us inferred sort of the same thing. Okay, so I turned a corner on the Canellises last night. They should have done this 2 weeks ago. We saw what happens when the power of love turns crazy with Sami Zayn confronting the Canelli last night, and then Maria smashing a vase over his head. Really hope that was sugar glass. What'd you think of this? And did this kind of get you a little more interested in this feud?
It was very powerful, Glenn. But you know, it was much better than they've done, like you said, in the past couple of weeks. It showed a little bit of development. Maria said, you know, she's always been a pretty decent talker.
Yeah,
she proved that last night. Mike Kanellis, God, I keep wanting to call him Mike Bennett. It's going to be a habit that I have to get rid of. But his shirt, rest in peace to the couch that died, to get that, but it fits the character brilliantly. So, you know, it was good. And it gave another, like I said, the layering was good tonight. Like, there was better character development than it was in-ring action a lot of time tonight. And Sami Zayn showed a little different side to him, to where he was kind of that still neurotic, innocent guy, but then he would, talking smack, he was actually quite serious.
Yeah.
Which was really good to see. So I like the different sides that we're seeing of everybody, and I thought it was an improvement for the Canelo for sure.
Maria plays crazy very well, and I think you know, it's good that she's in this role, but I think she would be a dominant force in the women's division. If they put her in the women's division, Carmella better watch out, because Maria is a whole other level in this character than Carmella is.
Yeah, probably about the same level in the ring, if not maybe a half step below. But now Jack O'Bean in the chat is basically telling you to watch out, that Mike's about to beat Sami, Glenn. So what are your thoughts on that?
Hey, for Sami, it's not about the win; it's about getting back up from the loss. You know, that's his character.
You've bought into the Kool-Aid, huh?
You know, you got to believe in something. Also, you know, here's the other reason why that Owens documentary is great on the DVD, is that the first half of it might as well be an Owens and Sami Zayn documentary. It was very, very good. And I think the first time anywhere I've seen Zayn confirming El Generico, just a little wrinkle, but one I appreciated, because, you know, normally he keeps that up pretty well in kayfabe. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think Sami, you know, look, hey, it's something for him to do, man. You know, I think they'll go back to the well with him and Owens. Who knows, man? If it's AJ versus Cena going in the fall, although I don't really think they'll do that now. I think they tried to put a pin in it, but I just don't see the story there, given how they're doing the mutual respect for each other. But I could definitely see them go, you know, before the end of the year, I'm sure they'll go back to KO versus Sami for another round. Interesting promo with Cedric Alexander for his I Quit match with Noam Dar on 205 Live. That was something.
Well, here's my thing with this is you have these 30-second terribly scripted promos that they are reading word for word. Like, all right, so these awesome video packages that WWE does for every single feud at every single pay-per-view, or even the previous week's segment, could we not just like put like a historical valued video package in place of these terrible little inset promos? Like, wouldn't that get you a little bit more hyped than a terribly scripted promo?
They got to do something with it. Make it more, or do something like more like Talking Smack, where maybe it's a little more improv, and they maybe have these guys go out there and do improvised promos and just show us the best bits. You know, just something to make it a little more lively and energetic. We went from that, man, Fashion Files last night. Holy crap. Just that end. Look, the segment itself was okay, but that entrance, I mean, the credits that they made to the Walker Texas Ranger thing were absolutely fantastic.
So good.
Every time I think I'm sick of this, you know.
Oh, they keep bringing us back, and they reel us in every single time. And this was one of the more average segments itself. Yeah. But really, the MVP of this segment to me was Mojo Rawley. And bless me for saying that. I've never said that in my entire life, because he played the straight man, like the hype guy, played the straight man in Breezango's comedy, and Zack Ryder being a little bit more broski this week than he has been since his return. But kudos to Mojo Rawley for showing a few acting chops. I thought that was solid.
Yeah. Although, man, do you think they even know who this mystery culprit is with
not a chance?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be disappointing. It's going to end up being very disappointing when we find out who the culprit is. It's probably not going to be American Alpha, probably not the Ascension. Just we're in this one for the journey, not the destination, folks. Let's talk about the main event: Kevin Owens and Rusev versus AJ Styles and John Cena in a tag match. The Faces won. What did you think of the match itself?
Match was good. I mean, with those four guys in it, it pretty much has no choice but to be at least decent. You could tell that they didn't. It was almost like a house show main event. There was a lot of posing, a lot of jaw jacking. I mean, there wasn't a ton of action. They obviously held back. I mean, because they want to hold all the action for their individual feuds in a couple weeks at Battleground. So, but was it a good 15, 20-minute TV main event? Sure. Did it really blow me away? Not really. But I think it was good for what it was. And we got to see, you know, probably the 4 biggest stars on the program.
Yeah. So next week's the go home show for Battleground. They gotta get us invested. They gotta make us believe it.
Yeah, because the card that they have right now, they're taking to Philadelphia, one of the most vocal crowds in the country. And right now, I fear for that program. It looks like an okay card, but when you compare it to like Great Balls of Fire, it's a little lackluster. So I'm almost afraid that Philly crowd is going to crap on it a little bit. So I really hope these guys over deliver with the matches that they're given.
Yeah. Let's see what happens, man. Battleground. And, you know, it just occurred to me in my head for some reason. I was thinking like, oh, it's been a year since the draft. Maybe we'll get in their draft. And then I went back to look at the Superstar Shakeup. And I was like, nope, that was the draft. There was no draft this year because they moved 10 wrestlers roughly on each side between each brand. So, yeah, lock in, folks. This is what it's looking like.
There's no need for a rotating door every 3 to 4 months. I mean, if they do it once a year, fine. But even twice a year, I wouldn't do it any more than that, though.
Yeah. So your prediction for Monday night on Raw, since you were not with us this week, Kurt Angle's big secret. We've been joking on the podcast that Matt Morgan's been texting inappropriate things to Kurt Angle, and that Kurt's going to bring him out on Monday. But who do you think it's going to be?
All right. So we have Dixie Carter on WWE television, right? Okay, sorry, I might have broke up there a little bit. Dixie Carter on WWE television with the Kurt Angle documentary. You have Stephanie McMahon, who's been off TV for many, many months. If you look at it logistically, a Kurt Angle Triple H match would make sense at SummerSlam. So Stephanie, I think, would be the easiest answer. I think maybe Dixie Carter being a wild card, but unless you think, were there any other maybe lost superstar theories? What did you guys come up with on Monday?
No, I think Dixie, Steph, Triple H, that was pretty much the scope of it. Would love to be surprised on this one.
Oh, absolutely. I hope we get a bit of a swerve here.
Yeah, Hornswoggle is Vince McMahon's illegitimate son. Who knows? So yeah, guys, crazy. So right before we get off the air here, great podcast today. Again, check out JJ Dillon's podcast. Great storyteller. Great just to listen to him talk today. We were going to talk about the latest with Alberto El Patron and Paige, and it looks like he's been suspended by GFW.
Yep, he has. And Jeff Jarrett is doing a media call today. Not sure if that is pertaining to that exact situation, but man, what are your general thoughts on this one, Glenn? Because, you know, we don't want to get too personal with relationship situations, but with alcohol and drugs, you know, being potentially involved with the domestic abuse allegations, just it's a bit of a mess, but just what are your general thoughts on it?
Well, look, I agree that we should respect wrestlers' personal lives for the most part. In this case, it was a very public incident, kind of weird that a fan got involved or involved herself in this. But, you know, I was saying that when you see that headline, you think about domestic violence. Normally there's an assumption you make about who's involved with it. And in this case, it's like, no, I think these two are, you know, I said it before, the Whitney and Bobby of professional wrestling, they are a danger to each other and should be separated, you know, legally, by force, if need be, whatever it takes, because it sounds to me like this is one of those toxic relationships that is, you know, full of passion in all of its different manifestations, you know, and just crazy, man. It's absolutely crazy, but good on GFW for, you know, trying to maintain a standard and show some rules and boundaries for their talent.
Absolutely. And I believe Raj and maybe even Joshua are going to be covering the conference call, media call with Jeff Jarrett that began at 1 p.m. Eastern. So I'm sure that we'll have highlights posted of that and probably check it out on our audio channel as well. As always, guys, subscribe on iTunes. Leave us a nice rating. If you have some feedback for us, leave it there as well. But good stuff, Glenn. I enjoyed JJ on the show.
That was great. And reminder, if you're a fan and you see two professional wrestlers or just even one professional wrestler having, you know, some sort of domestic or relationship dispute out in public, don't feel obliged to get in and mediate. That's not necessarily your role.
No.
You know, if you think someone's in trouble, call the authorities. Don't say, I need to get some audio and video of this, and I'm going to go and intervene. Let the proper channels take their job. But I do appreciate that the woman that shot it got a hold of Raj, was on the phone with Raj talking to him about it. You know, so I guess if you feel the need to involve yourself, Wrestling Inc. first, right? I mean, think of us as the place to break to exclusive. But for the most part, mind your own business and don't ever bother wrestlers at the airport. That's like the biggest dick move that you can do, you know, especially if they're arriving from someplace. If they're departing, you know, do the head nod, or do the, you know, I'm really sorry to do this, I just want to shake your hand, and then leave it at that. But don't be like, hey, let's, you know, do some couples counseling right here. I'll mediate. So everyone, thanks for tuning into the Wrestling Inc. podcast. You can follow Chris Knockdown Radio on Twitter, myself, Glenn Rubenstein, Mr. Raj Giri 303, JJ Dillon, thanks for being on the show. And we'll be back here Monday night to talk about Monday Night Raw, the fallout from the Kurt Angle situation with myself, Raj Giri, and Matt Morgan. Until next time, folks, I'm Glenn Rubenstein. Take care.